the agenda as a subcommittee, and we would do that, and maybe we would come up with a regulation and make changes, or maybe we won't. But
That doesn't need to be decided this evening, though, am I correct? Or do you want that decided this evening?
No, it doesn't have to be. I mean, we can have the discussion. If you want to
Right.
ponder this item, you can sit and think about it. Certainly, it's going to be, again, your discretion as to whether or not you want to go forward. If you decide you want to go forward with a regulation change to entertain a change to this section, or take the language that the
Right.
applicant's proposing, you can direct me as your staff to do that work, and that's all you would do. Say, please make the application, start the process. And then I'll be happy to explain that process to the commission going forward. But we would be required to have a public hearing and put notice in the paper.
Okay.
I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Lepowski.
Good evening. Brian Lepkowski, 27 Green Valley Lakes Road. I stand before you today this evening, rather, to propose a amendment to the 6-15-4 of the regulations, which includes the language that I have added, including along roads, and also the remaining sentence there, which gives the Planning Commission the discretion they need to enact the buffer where they see fit. I spent a countless amount of hours and time and research into this, especially after last time when you also had voted that it was inconsistent with the regulations because it would increase too much frontage. What I came up with was a waiver that would basically, enact the buffer where it was needed to shield residents or existing homes or properties from a road in a situation like mine, where I'm basically being unwillingly turned into a corner lot. Yes, and from a standard lot with side frontage into now a corner lot because of the placement of the road here. There are countless examples in town, as Gary had mentioned, where there were large parcels of land that are zoned R40 that are designed for easement by basically separating two existing homes with that 50-foot right-of-way. Now, if you take a look at the way that our property is configured next to this large parcel of land, there is no such right-of-way there. And the reason is that the road could virtually be put anywhere along that frontage from 4 Mile River right up to our home. The radius cut that is currently there is not on any maps on file with the town. It is not in the maps for the GIS. It only exists there physically, when you see it on an aerial map or when you drive by. I would like to point to the commission that there are dozens of radius cuts throughout the town that have no intent of being furthered, and that radius cut has been existing there from before the time I was born. So, if something was to happen there, I would have hoped that it would have happened a long time ago. Because there is no plan for a road or any type of a right-of-way there, it would seem to me, based on the way that my home is configured and the fact that I have a 30-foot side yard setback and not a 50, and also just the shape of the property itself, that there was very little intent for my current residence to be a corner lot. And we designed our home and configured it as such. So basically what this regulation change proposes is to allow the commission, under their discretion, to enact the buffer where they see a need to shield an existing residential property like my own from a road that would be passed between it. Gary had mentioned R40 to R40, and that is perfectly fine. I have absolutely no problem with a house being next to me or behind me or in front of me. It's the road that is the problem. And that road could be placed in other, areas along that frontage there, but it is not, because builders do tend to go with the path of least resistance, and also, there's a protection of profit here that they stand to gain by having additional lots on the opposite side of their proposed road. The road, even if they were to move it, would be well out of the upland review area. I don't know if you have a copy of that in front of you, but that map is quite a ways from that 100-foot upland review area is quite a ways from even where a proposal would be for that road. My home is only 30 feet from the property line, which would mean that giving the town right away there, which is 10 feet, Gary, I believe, that my house would be, the physical structure of my house, my kitchen window would be 40 feet from that road, which is barely the distance between where you're sitting to the end of the room. It is very close, and it is not the design of, you know, our neighborhood or the way that there's any other lot in our neighborhood. Every other corner lot has a adequate side setback and front setback. I do not. I have, you know, countless examples. I'm sorry, I wasn't prepared to speak tonight. There's some confusion about how this all works, as I'm sure you guys feel the same way. I have many, you know, examples of such situations where there's a 50-foot right-of-way. I don't know, Gary, can I? Okay. Yeah, sorry, I don't have any copies, but if you guys want to pass this along. I don't know what Gary had in that memo, but these are some of the considerations I made when I had put that regulation change together. And the plan of, you know, the point of our regulation change would to be, you know, to protect a unique situation like our own, but any place else in town where this may occur. But at the same time, I certainly wouldn't want to stop any further development in the town where it was planned correctly to do so. And where I feel it's correct is in the examples that I'm passing along here, where you can see that there are property lines split by a 50-foot right-of-way where a planned road would go. The waiver that I've added to the end of the amendment would allow a road to go in any of those situations. And from what I can see in the extensive research that I've done, there's actually no instance where it would stop development or stifle development whatsoever, unless there was a situation that I haven't seen, similar to ours, where, you know, a house is next to a large parcel of land and someone just physically, a builder just decided to put the road right along the property line. And also I have here a copy of the GIS map, which shows my home with no road whatsoever next to it. And I guess if you had an imagination, you could say, yeah, I guess I could go there, but it could also go anywhere along the 200 some odd feet that extends from my property line all the way down to the 12-mile river.
How many done?
Which would be the same as this.
Yeah.
Yeah, do it on here, much easier, you'd see it much better. Right?
So this is
Would be the same as this.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I think
Question is about this.
that GIS is
Mhm.
overlaid.
Question is
It's the
about
same thing as this, but it's
that.
overlaid.
When you bought the house, it was there.
Okay, so
Question is, to move that, you're now in wetland property.
Is here.
Yeah.
should we have a copy of the new,
This road.
Pretty good.
This is the original developer shop. They must have shown where the roads are gonna be. There's a road that goes through here, and it's a cul-de-sac, right? And the development, the housing is up in here. And there's another road that comes out here, the fire access.
the previous,
That was there when we purchased the house. You must have seen that.
Thank you.
I mean, I've built like 6 homes myself, so I look at these things. And I'm on a corner lot.
While you're reviewing, I do ask the commission to consider what the purpose of a buffer is and why it is currently in your regulations. I do believe that the purpose of a buffer, when used in a subdivision, is designed with the intent of shielding an existing resident who already has a home there and already lives in that neighborhood to not be adversely affected by future development. And I believe that that's exactly what the intent of the regulation is. unfortunately, the language that currently exists, I don't believe considered the possibility of the situation that's before us right now, with the road basically negating the contiguous lot language. In essence, the road becomes the 40-foot buffer that's in your current regulations. And it's kind of a nasty surprise because of the language. And so I'm only seeking to change that. I believe that this is consistent with the CDD regulations, or that it's at least neutral. It does not further, but it does not hamper either. Nor is there any intention for me to further or reduce the CDD regulations. Simply, my regulation proposal or the amendment is to give the power back to the Planning Commission in a very unique situation like my own, where they can use their own discretion to decide whether or not a buffer should be enacted or upheld or used to shield an existing resident from something like that. And using the information that is in front of you, aside from a visual of that radius cut, I do again want to ask the commission to consider the fact that there is no proposed road there. There is no property line similar to the two examples that I have shown you that would even have suggested that a road would go there. Think about all of the events leading up to this. The fact that I had met with Gary years before, well, not years, but quite a bit of time prior to me actually purchasing the land, inquiring about the radius cut, and walked away pretty much after a lot of research on that with the feeling that it should pretty much be disregarded, the same as it has been for the last 40 some odd years. And if I had seen a property line cut similar to the two examples that I had given you, we probably wouldn't even be having this discussion right now, because I would have never purchased the property. I had no indicator other than that visual piece of pavement there that has filled with garbage and has sand piles on it right now as to the intent for a road to ever go there. And ask yourself, how my house is configured, how about my setbacks, the way that they are. Certainly, someone who built a house on a piece of land, we had a blank piece of paper in front of us. I could have designed the house any way I wanted to. Why would I choose to put the house so close to where a proposed road would be if I had any, indication that would occur? Why would I ever put my patio right there? Why would I do any of those types of things if I had any inkling that this would occur? I purchased next to it just a giant, kind of jaggedly shaped piece of land that the road could have went in numerous different places on the opposite side of the road, further down from me, many different places. It just, unfortunately for the developer, or for me, the developers decided to maximize the buildable lots as they usually do. And unfortunately, you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet, and in this case, I'm the egg that gets broken so that he can maximize the amount of lots that he can sell. But again, I did spend a lot of time going through this. I kind of went to the School of Hard Knocks the first time. Hearing Gary's comments at the first proposal, if you remember, we were talking about the frontage and how it would require an excessive amount of frontage if I were to, ask the commission to consider a 40-foot buffer at all times on either side of a proposed road. So that's why I added the language for the waiver, which, would only apply in very certain instances where a planned road or a right-of-way is already in place. And it's pretty, to me, obviously because I've gone through it, it reads pretty simply, and I tried to keep it as simple as possible so that there was no misinterpretation, as, the same way that's occurred for me regarding the road itself. Any place where there is a 50-foot right-of-way and there are two lots separated by such, that waiver can be easily, can be waived. And so any developer that's looking at these large pieces of property and asking himself if there's going to be a problem there, it should be just as black and white as any other regulation as they're trying to put together a lot plan or a lot yield plan, or however they choose to decide. That waiver, I think, would be something that would be very easy for the commission to to approve, in any of those situations. No, that's it.
Questions?
I have none. Commissioners, any questions, Mr. Lipinski?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are we on to the next motion, Gary?
So I don't know if that's something that you want to discuss at another meeting, pass it over. Research it, I do have a question, more of a legal question, that's, let's just say this was the regulation, you waived the requirement for a buffer on one of these situations where you have a house on either side of a 50-foot strip of land that goes back to a 100-acre parcel. You waive it in that case because obviously you can't put in a road, right? You can't achieve the 40-foot buffer. So we waive it in that case, but how about when I go across the street and propose a subdivision on a large 100-foot, I can achieve the buffer, but let's say I got environmental factors that force me to put it over. Why can't I, as a developer, say, well, how come it's okay to do it there but not here? What's the difference between, I know this is a rudimentary sketch, but you can see, here's my road, here's my cul-de-sac, I have a house on either side of that proposed road, right? There's a 50-foot separation here. Right? So these two guys don't get the benefit of a buffer, but this house does? If it's all, whether it be the same zone or not, I guess it's irrelevant. I'm just wondering if the town would incur any liabilities. So that's something that I would ask council maybe to help figure out, because I had to sit there and say, well, why can he do it? Why does the commission waive it in that case and allow the rules to be broken when why can't I do it over here? So I don't know, maybe that's something that the commission would think about. I can get clarification on that and provide that to you.
And I had another question, like, you said there's no application for this type of request, so there's no,
There's no formal application that he can bring forward to the commission and request a change of the subdivision regulations. He can request changes to the zoning regulations. So the commission has the discretion to either say, you know what, Gary, we'd like to go research this. I'll go research it. Gary, we'd like to make an application to change the regs. I'll make the application to change the regs on your behalf.
so as a matter of precedent too, say we do this based on public, like, basically a
So-
request,
So
a
we
written
would,
request.
the town.
So now every time that one of these comes up, then we're gonna form another subcommittee or another,
You'll either form a subcommittee, you'll direct me to write it. I'll work with the town attorney in doing so. And then we'll go through the public hearing process, you'll hear public comment, and then maybe based on that, you may or may not approve it. You don't even have to act on that application. There's no filing fee, other than
but this isn't even really an application.
it's a request for the commission to consider reviewing their regulations essentially, and particularly
Really
this section.
basically, but it comes down to words.
So, this is
Wait.
also,
Just let me just,
I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. So what you're actually saying is that all of this really does just come down to is words, correct? On this?
Yeah, specific, it's language, yes.
Specific language.
That has
Okay,
impacts.
That's really what I needed to claim here.
So I think because Mr. Lepowski cannot make a formal application to the
Right.
planning
Okay.
commission, he's requesting the commission consider revising the regs. You don't have to decide on that this evening.
No, I know.
Certainly, there are changes to the regulations that I know have to happen in terms of bonding, Section 9. That I was going to bring that forward, but when I do, because we have to go through that public hearing, I might as well bring other changes. So, I'm more than happy to sit down and look at these regulations and say, are they really functioning and working the way we intended 8 years ago? That's really the question at hand. I think Mr. Lepowski is just bringing it to your attention that there's a situation in town, particularly his, whereby the regulations aren't working in his favor. So that's just why that's, you know, it's kind of, you got the history of how this got created. So,
So I guess my question is, this is basically a zoning question primarily. I mean,
well, we have regulations.
no, I
that- yeah.
understand.
You know, it's ultimately, you know, the zoning commission is going to take action on their regulation, but our regulations should be consistent with theirs.
Right.
So if they change it, we should change ours. If they don't, then we would just leave it the same. If we make changes to our regulations, we should advise them that these are the changes that we've made, maybe unbeknownst to them. So at least they're familiar and aware and can weigh in maybe on those changes. Because we could change other sections of the regs that maybe have no bearing on zoning. For instance, stormwater, right?
Okay.
Yeah, it's-
So we're due for a POCD rewrite anyway, right?
Well,
With
that's different than the subdivision reg.
Oh,
POCD is
yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
10-year document.
Documents, well, that's
The
what
subdivision
we're asking you to
regulations just stand until they're changed. And that's whenever people subdivide land, that's what we use to review it. So I'll look into those couple of questions, just to get some clarification, if, should the commission decide to go forward with something or pursue something in the future, then we'll at least have the answers to my questions. And if you have any other
Any more
questions, if you have questions, if you think of something, you go home, feel free to, you know, shoot me an email,
Roger.
give me a call.
Well, no, I'm
and I'll-
just thinking it would be helpful if people knew in advance, you know, that is, you know, if I were building a home, you know, how does one protect himself from, you know,
Future development.
having that happen down the road?
I mean, again, the only thing I can point to is the regulations are there.
Mhm.
You know, while I am sympathetic to his situation, he did buy the lot he bought. It is what it is. I can't change that. The area is zoned R40.
Mhm.
We've seen an application that came forward.
Mhm.
You know, whether or not the road, again, as I said, whether it was planned for extension or not at that location, they made the claim that it wasn't, and that there's no plans in town hall that show any proposed road. I think it's safe, there are plans in town hall that suggest there's a road there. So I think whether or not, now, the legalese here is whether or not they've been filed in the clerk's office. So that's another step either I or they would have to take. So I don't know that that's been done. Maybe they've done it, and I don't know. But
Is there a requirement for developers to specify in a prospectus where future roads are supposed to be? And
usually,
then-
when a developer comes in with a subdivision plan, they're gonna say, "Hey, this is phase 2, 3. We don't have it laid out yet, but
This
you know,
is-
it's gonna look something like this."
you know,
That's typically what they do.
Mhm.
So you would know, okay, they're planning a road here. So if you look at a good example of, say, Goldfinch Terrace, both ends of that are planned for extension. Now, they won't be. They'll be, you know, and the intent of the landowner is just to end that subdivision where it's at and put in 3 or 4 lots. But the theory was that the 2 roads were gonna connect behind that, and so that's, you know, we knew, the town knew, was aware when that subdivision was applied for, that there might be a final phase. So that's kind of the standard. But there's no other questions?
Not for me. Commissioners?
No?
No?
Thank you.
Do we have to do a motion?
We ready to do that? Are we ready? Say that again?
That's my favorite part of the meeting.
I know, mine too. Do I hear, there's no more there's no more discussion, no more motions? Are we ready to adjourn?
So moved?
Second.
So moved. Thank you. No discussion. Thank you. Done.
All in favor?
8:30. Gary, do you want me to fill this in the back, this back sheet, or are you doing?